and the Tories could say, vote for us, and we will oppose IndyRef 2. That's why Ruth Davidson got the votes. That's why Douglas Ross gets the votes. Douglas Ross's vote share is going to go down very significantly in this general election. He might hold the same number of seats, he might even gain seats, but his vote share is going to go down from 25% to somewhere in the teens, most likely. That will not be the fault of Douglas Ross. That will be the fault of the Supreme Court, amongst others, because the reason it's going down is because independence is now off the table.
Andy, I want to come to you on a question on Douglas Ross, actually. We didn't mention him in the kind of approval racings there, but you have mentioned that he kind of, there was this launch, Douglas Ross speaking about the failure of 17 years of SNP government, and I suppose how the Scottish Conservatives are positioning themselves in the context of this campaign. I was quite struck, actually, by the Herald Unspun email, which dropped into my inbox on Tuesday evening, the subject line of which was, is it time for the Tories to ditch Douglas Ross? And I just wanted to get your take on kind of what the argument is here.
Oh, I don't think there's a good argument for it. Look, firstly, the Tory campaign in Scotland is completely different to the Tory campaign in England. Rishi Sunak is looking at the Lib Dems in London in the south, he's looking at Labour in the north, and he's looking at reform everywhere. Douglas Ross is not looking at any of those things. Douglas Ross is looking only at the SNP because the 6 seats he holds are at risk from the SNP. Well, if they're at risk at all, they'd be at risk from the SNP. And the 3 to 6 seats that conceivably, if things go his way, he could gain are all SNP seats. So it's a different campaign. There's a broader point here, though, which people persistently fail to grasp beyond all comprehension, which is that it doesn't matter who the leader of the Scottish Tory party is, you get the same result anyway. I mean, this has been proved now. We know this is the case. We've gone through this era where Ruth Davidson was leader of the Tory party, and she was rightly lauded for being a different leader for the Tories. She was very skilled. She was very popular. She got 31 seats in 2016. If Douglas Ross was uniquely hopeless, then why did he also get 31 seats in 2021? The answer to that question is because it doesn't matter who the leader of this party is. It only matters what the high-level messaging is. And the reason the Tories have done well, whether it be under Ruth Davidson or under Douglas Ross, is not because there has been some mass participation of people who've decided actually they are centre-right voters after all, and they really actually quite like the Tories now, even though they didn't before. The reason they were voting for the Tories is because the Tories were the strongest party of the Union. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't particularly interested in the Union, and the Tories could say, vote for us, and we will oppose IndyRef 2. That's why Ruth Davidson got the votes. That's why Douglas Ross gets the votes. Douglas Ross's vote share is going to go down very significantly in this general election. He might hold the same number of seats, he might even gain seats, but his vote share is going to go down from 25% to somewhere in the teens, most likely. That will not be the fault of Douglas Ross. That will be the fault of the Supreme Court, amongst others, because the reason it's going down is because independence is now off the table. The future of this party is not dependent on changing leaders. The future of the party is dependent on changing the party. I honestly don't know how often these people need to see it before they grasp that.
Andrew Learmonth is the person who was writing for the Herald, by the way, and it's because one of the activists came up and were sort of very critical of what Douglas Ross has been doing over the last kind of couple of weeks and months. But this gets us into a kind of wider conversation, I think, about the campaign so far. And Geoff, I want to ask you about the SNP's campaign. We've talked about the polling. Last week, Andy was making the argument that perhaps John Swinney gets something of a free pass at this general election, given he has only just taken over in the last couple of weeks. In terms of what you are seeing from the SNP campaign, what are you making of it? Is it enough for the SNP to make real progress before election day?
Well, the first week of the SNP election campaign has been dictated by Michael Matheson. And so, you've seen that the last the various visits that John Swinney and Kate Forbes have done, and instead of being able to put forward a refreshed agenda, the first question they get asked is, why did you defend Michael Matheson against the sanctions that were being put forward by The Standards Committee. So it's not been an auspicious start to the campaign from the SNP, and I think they've seen the light on that particular issue, and will put down an amendment to basically support the sanction, which was what they should have done originally, in my opinion. So it's difficult to assess exactly, what the narrative is going to be for them. One of the things that we touched on earlier with Alan was that the SNP have been saying is that John Swinney and Kate Forbes are the two most popular leaders based on polling. Well, that's now not the case given the poll today. So that's something that's now been removed from their armoury. There's a kind of mantra around Scotland first, putting Scotland first. It's kind of a traditional slogan for the SNP in general elections gone past, where we've always struggled for relevance, actually, in fairness. I don't know. I've said for some time I would like to see the attacks not on removing the Tories from Scotland, because you're only fighting 6 seats then, and to coin a phrase, you're giving a free pass to your principal opponents, the Labour Party. And I'd like to see much more scrutiny of the Labour Party's pitch to the people of Scotland, and try and expose Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar on issues that they don't want to talk about. So things like Brexit, because they need those votes in the north of England, and things like immigration policy, like I've said before, and try to make it, we know that they're going to be the next government, so try to put in a platform that keeps their feet to the fire when they don't come good on these things, and then use that as a platform for 26. I don't know. That would be my guess. I'm not overly inspired by what I've seen so far, but I'm not overly inspired by what I've seen so far from any of the parties, if I'm being absolutely honest. So
yeah. And why is that? What do you? And what's
Wednesday morning? I think the Tories have lost first mover advantage. They called the election, so you'd think that they had a plan in to hit the ground running. They haven't. I think Kat pointed this out in a tweet yesterday. I thought it was really good. I mean, Labour have hit the ground running in terms of their message discipline, in terms of their organisation. Look much more the professional outfit, has to be said. But for my money so far, and we'll see what happens in the next 5 weeks, they're trying to say nothing really of any real substance. It's all about trying to win on the back of not being the Tories. And I fancy that Keir Starmer will come under more scrutiny because he's the de facto Prime Minister than he otherwise would in an election. And the SNP have been caught in the hot. John Swinney didn't want this election right now. He wanted some time to get his feet under the table, and was planning a programme for government. He was not thinking about an election. So for that reason, it's been pretty uninspiring stuff all round, I'd have said.
Yeah.
Can I just very briefly come in on that, though? Don't you think, though, Geoff, it's a good thing for John Swinney to have it now? I mean, then won't he reflect and say, at least we got it out of the way straight away? I mean, 6 months, if it was November, he might have faced an element of criticism for how have you not managed to turn anything around in 6 months? I thought you were supposed to be better. Nobody's going to say that in 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree with your analysis, Andy, on that. I mean, I'm to a certain degree, but at the end of the day, he's the leader, and if the SNP have significant reversals in seats, he'll still have to take an element of responsibility. My point was more, it's quite clear that they were not ready as a party for this campaign, is my point. And so therefore, I was asked about the campaign so far. For me, it's been pretty uninspiring.
Go on, Kat.
Yeah, I would got a few thoughts on that. And again, I think Geoff's right, and I think that you can tell by his slightly demoralised tone in terms of the sort of overall view of the campaign. But for John Swinney to start the SNP campaign, firstly by defending Michael Matheson, and then to come out with incredible hubris, which was that I'm the most popular politician in Scotland, if not the UK, and the SNP are going to capitalise on that, and I'm going to be absolutely everywhere. I mean, first of all, I can't imagine that voters take highly to a politician saying that they're very popular, because politicians are just generally unpopular. But also it made a complete hostage to fortune, which is exactly what's happened now. And the glee that came from the Labour press release in relation to this particular matter, I think is warranted and should be a cautionary tale for John Swinney. The point about Labour being well prepared for this, I think, is also very true. I mean, this is the first election pretty much since 2007 where Labour has been basically outperforming the SNP in terms of a digital campaign. The Labour candidates everywhere were ready for this. They had professional, slick-looking videos that went out almost immediately on Wednesday night across Scotland. They've also got, there's messaging, there's across different platforms. There's unskippable YouTube adverts that are coming to a video near you. And I think that this is really, and this just kind of, again, embeds that sense of very well prepared and really organised, and just sort of like, I think the SNP are going to have to match that. While the point of John Swinney getting a free pass on this, I think is probably right. I think though, what the SNP did by avoiding a leadership contest, firstly, it avoided a period of introspection, which frankly has been long overdue in the SNP, and a proper one, not the one that they had last year. But also it avoided John Swinney having the opportunity to properly introduce himself to the public as First Minister. I suspect that until last week, a lot of people in Scotland were completely unaware that actually the First Minister had changed and it was John Swinney now. And the first time they actually realised it was when he was on TV defending the guy that tried to charge £11,000 for his watching football on his iPad to the taxpayer. And hence why his popularity has gone down. So if the SNP have a bad election and then they go into this, then they're basically going to, and if John Swinney doesn't start to correct some of the errors that he's been making in terms of his political judgment on this campaign, then actually the SNP are going to be potentially in a worse position, because they end up having an internal battle without the ability to essentially manifest change, which is in the way that most parties do, which is by changing leadership and changing direction through that leadership.
Thank you so much for watching. Press subscribe and you'll get all the best videos offering insight on Scottish politics delivered straight to your feed. Press subscribe and stick around. And if you'd like to hear our conversations in full, open up your podcast app and search for Holyrood Sources.